Sword Art Online is easily one of the most popular shows of modern anime, getting a sequel with a video game adaptation and even a feature-length movie on the way. What makes this interesting is the fact that this show's popularity is mostly hilted on its premise. What's a premise? A premise is an assertion, a proposition, which forms the basis of a work or theory. It was the premise of this show that originally got me interested in checking it out in the first place. It wasn't the fact that it sounded new or different, because the idea has been done before, in varying mediums of genres of movies and etc. It was how in my mind I pictured they would present it. The potential for a show like this is infinite, especially with the direction you choose to go in. So what is the premise of Sword Art Online? Well, the basic premise of the show is a large group of online players are stuck in an MMO against their will, but in order to survive and escape, they must complete 100 levels of the game in order to win, as well as beating all the bosses that are in each level. This premise is a cool idea. Based on the design and the look of the show, you would think that this would be a fun ride to take you on, but ultimately the premise and setup this show drops you off in doesn't last too long. What do I mean by that? Well, I have taken deliberately of separating the show into 3 sections. The first being episode 1 through 9 that focuses on the world of Sword Art Online and the events that take place in it. The second focusing on the latter half of the part 1 that is all about the love story and the endgame. The third section is all about part 2 that shifts to a completely new direction and causes the show to fall apart almost altogether. Let's take a look at these. In the first section, we are introduced to Kirito, a gamer who beta tested the game beforehand and is now playing the final product like everyone else. He meets some friends and even gets a good head start in the game. It's when he, along with everyone else in the game, become trapped inside by a madman's crazy goal to keep everyone logged into the game, stuck until someone finally defeats the final boss and sets everyone free. A very cool premise and a start to the show is shown as the following episodes we are shown boss battles, people getting together to fight while others have given up. You can see a clear separation of those who are serious versus those who just got stuck in a bad situation. There are tons of themes and ideas brought up in these first episodes that, if delved into further, could make for an interesting show. In the mix of this journey, we are introduced to Asuna, a quiet girl who equally strengthens the frontliners but mostly keeps to herself, similar to Kirito. She goes on her own path, only to suddenly being brought back into Kirito's life as they get ever so closer to reaching the final boss. But before this could happen, we have a slight detour in the story. From that point on, we go on a romance story that completely takes over the focus of the show. We no longer feel the stress of the characters having to get through this final boss and save not just their own lives, but everyone else that is still left in the game. Instead, we follow Kirito and Asuna as they get away from it all and live a simple life in a forest section of the game. After adopting an AI, it became very clear that this show needed to extend the life out of what was a focused story. Character development is important to storytelling, but it works the best when it is interweaved with the plot. Most television shows use episodes that aren't related to the main arc of the story, but just focus on developing the characters. A term most people use to describe these episodes are filler, as it can feel like it's just an easy way to delay the end of the story, making up time so we can still have episodes but not feel like there's been a break. I like to think that there are 2 kinds of filler, one that further develops the characters, whether it be through backstory or situations that ultimately change the way you look at them, another reflecting the previous statement that is just a way to delay the inevitable. Sometimes they can be both, and most occasions that is when they are used. Sword Art Online seems to go in what I would illustrate as a downhill slope, starting from the top where all the character development lies and where we head toward the next episodes. The hill continues to drive down to the bottom, to the depths of filler. Unfortunately, we are cut short of the filler to actually focus on the end of SAO and the end of part 1. I say unfortunately because this is the last time we actually see what is left of all the good and potential that this show had to offer. This is when we enter part 2. Part 2 is a different beast entirely, where the show shifts so much that it is hard to even see that it was made by the same people. The beginning picks up right after part 1 and feels like a nice follow-up, at least how a sequel would start, showing that the effects of this game has had on everyone's lives and bodies and for being plugged in for so long. From there on, the show focuses on a new story where Kirito's sister is in love with him and Asuna is still stuck in the game that was SAO but has now changed to a new game because of a new bad guy that wants to take over the company that Asuno's father runs by marrying her against her own will. I would delve more into this, but it honestly has already been done in a much more depth that I would ever get into. Link in the description. It is interesting to see a show go from having potential to almost working backwards to make you regret watching what was even a show at all. Sword Art Online is a prime example of a show that doesn't live up to the standard introduced by itself. But even with all the problems this show has, it is still looked at overall positive and is what you think of when you look at modern anime. Why is that? Well, looking back, I can't help but really think of the positives, aka the first half of the show. It's almost as like I went out of my way to subconsciously remove all the bad parts from my memory, because the second half honestly feels like a completely different show to me. The premise going downhill is becoming a noticeable trend in modern anime, and if continued could start to reflect the genre as a whole. But whether it be for the positive as to forcing the studios to take a look and work forward avoiding this mistake, or affecting the already dying industry because of the increase of lack of interest, either one is a possibility. For better or worse, this show has forever caused me to take a step back before and during I watch a new anime from a current season, seeing the subtle hints on where the story is going, if the story has a focus at all, or when the idea is really cool but the presentation says otherwise. So the next time you notice a show that is taking a turn or going in a direction you aren't a fan in, take a step back and think about what went wrong. Was it the story not living up to the initial premise? Because the future of storytelling can only improve when you correct the mistakes of yourself or what you see in others, taking what they were trying to achieve and making it your own. This is What's Anime. See you next time.